Joshua chapter 8. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear or be discouraged. March with all your warriors against the city of Ai. I have given into your hands its king and its people, the city and its territory. You shall deal with Ai as you have dealt with Jericho and its king, but you may take possession of the plunder and all the animals. So now, prepare an ambush behind the city." So Joshua left with all his warriors and went up to Ai. Then he chose 30,000 valiant warriors and sent them out by night. And he commanded them, "Lie in ambush behind the city. Do not go very far and be ready. I and all the people who are with me shall close in on the city. But when they come out against us, as they did before, we shall flee from them. Then they will pursue us and go out far from the city, thinking that we are fleeing from them as before. But then you shall rise from where you are hiding and occupy the city. The Lord our God will give it to us. After taking the city, you shall burn it according to what the Lord has commanded. These are my orders." So Joshua sent them out, and they went to the place of ambush, between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city, while Joshua spent that night in the midst of his people. Very early in the morning, Joshua rose and mustered his army, and then marched at the head of the people to Ai, accompanied by the leaders. All the warriors who were with him went up and marched until they reached the front of the city. Then they encamped opposite the northern side of the city. The valley separated them from the city. Then he took 5,000 men whom he set in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city. The people then set up their camp to the north of the city and their rear guard to the west. That night Joshua was in the valley. When the king of Ai saw the situation, he made haste with all his people to attack Israel on the slope facing the Arabah, without knowing that the Israelites had prepared an ambush behind the city. Joshua and the Israelites pretended that they were being defeated, and so fled to the road leading to the wilderness. Then all the men in the city were called to pursue them, and as they pursued Joshua, they were getting farther away from the city. Every man in Ai or Bethel went after the Israelites, leaving the city wide open with no one to protect it. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Stretch out toward Ai the javelin you have in your hand, because I am about to give you this city." Joshua stretched out the javelin in his hand towards the city, and as soon as he did so, the warriors in ambush rose out of their places and ran to the city. They entered and seized the city and set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke from the city rising to the sky, and they lost their courage to escape in any direction, as they were trapped by the Israelites, for the Israelites who were fleeing turned back upon them. When Joshua and all the Israelites saw that the city had been taken by the warriors in ambush and was going up in smoke, they struck back at the men of Ai. Since those in the city came out against them, the men of Ai were hemmed in by Israelites on either side, who cut them down without any fugitives or survivors, except the king of Ai, who was taken alive and brought to Joshua. All the inhabitants of Ai who had pursued the Israelites into the wilderness were slain by the sword, either in the field or in the desert, down to the last man. Then all the Israelites returned to the city and killed all by the sword. The total of those who fell that day, both men and women, was 12,000, the entire population of Ai. Joshua did not draw back the hand with which he stretched out the javelin until all the inhabitants of Ai had been killed, in accordance with the solemn ban. But the Israelites took for themselves the livestock and the plunder of that city, as the Lord had commanded Joshua. Joshua burned the city and left it in ruins. That place has remained so to this day. As for the king of Ai, Joshua had him hanged on a tree until the sun set. Then he had his body taken down. They cast it at the entrance of the city and raised over it a great heap of stones, which can be seen to this day. Joshua then built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal. He fulfilled what Moses had commanded the people of Israel. And according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, the altar was made of uncut stones and was built without the use of an iron tool. On this altar, he offered burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. There, in the presence of the Israelites, he wrote upon the stones a copy of the law which Moses had written. All the people stood on both sides of the ark with their leaders, officials, and judges. Opposite it were the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the Lord. Israelites by birth and resident aliens were together. Half the people were in front of Mount Gerizim, and the other half were near Mount Ebal, according to Moses' commandment for the blessing of Israel. Joshua proceeded to read the words of blessing and curse, and all that is written in the book of the law. He did not omit any word from all that was written by Moses. He read it with a loud voice before the assembly of all Israel, including women, children, and aliens who lived among them.